Tifu by having SX in my parents' bedroom. My wife, 33F, and I, 30, are visiting my childhood home. We are living with our parents. Last night they went out to a party and left us in charge. My wife and I were drinking a lot. We were having some relationship issues too. It led us to argue for days. Even before coming to our hometown, we discussed it. Yesterday the same thing happened. Except we were drunk and were a little too honest. She told me how she never feels attractive because I ignore her. I missed her because the last time I tried to do something about our intimacy issues she ignored me. We both messed up in the communication part in our life. So, we were ranting and confessed to each other that we still love the other and wish there was something to spice up our marriage because lately it has been stale. One thing led to another. We started kissing on the couch. We were vigorous. We haven't had sex in 6 months, so all pent-up emotions and horniness was coming out. Mixing alcohol creates a recipe for disaster. We made this into a challenge. We decided that we would have sex in every room in the house. My parents went to a party with their old friend. I was sure they will not come home before 1 a.m. And it was still early. We were going at it. First it was my childhood bedroom. Then we moved to the guest room, the kitchen and so on. Lastly we went to our parents' bedroom. I was a little drunk but still cautious that we were doing it in our parents' bed. Somehow this made both of us even hornier and we were going at it roughly. The bed frame was hitting the wall but we did not care. Suddenly, I hear a crack noise. The bed frame was cracked. I got up and panicked. My wife was telling me to calm down because they wouldn't notice. I was still unsure. My parents came home late at night. We cleaned their room just the way it was to avoid suspicion. Later in the morning my dad complained the bed has broken. He was sleeping and suddenly the bed broke when he was turning. My dad has a huge body, so I can see the bed must have broken due to his body pressure. I haven't told my parents yet. They are still wondering how this bed can break so easily. I lied to my dad and told him the bed frame was very old. It must have become weak over time. He bought it. I do feel guilty because he probably doesn't have enough money now to get a new bed because he fixed his car and AC just recently. Ida for telling my roommate that I don't give an F about her boyfriend's allergies. I, 24F, have been living with my roommate Layla, 25F, for about 10 months. We have a 2-year lease, so I really want to fix this so we're not miserable for the next year, and to start I need to see if I'm in the wrong. Layla started dating Kyle about 6 months ago. Kyle has severe food allergies to shellfish, nuts and soy, as well as a lot of more mild/moderate allergies. I use nuts and soy a lot in my cooking and some occasional shrimp. At first, Layla would tell me that Kyle was coming over and I would just adjust whatever I was planning on making if it was something that would be aerosolized, mostly nuts, and this was fine. He's never had any reactions at our apartment for my food. But it slowly escalated and now they want me to not keep any ingredient in the apartment that could cause him anaphylaxis, even if I'm not actively eating or cooking it while he's over. I've refused and they've both pushed back a lot on it, and I snapped a little and told them I don't give a FCK about his allergies. I can accommodate him to an extent, but I don't care if the contents of my cabinet make him uncomfortable. He doesn't need to be near my things at all. They're being very dramatic and insisting I'm gonna kill him with my selfishness by having closed jars of nuts in the kitchen I pay to use. But I'm not going to have my diet restricted by someone who doesn't even live here. Layla isn't speaking to me at all right now and I feel a little bad now because I do understand how serious allergies are, but I also have a feeling that they're overextending boundaries by telling me what I can or can't eat when he's not even here like at all. I don't know what they thought this was and who I thought I was, to be honest. Let me know if I'm tripping or not in the replies because I feel as though I am not, but maybe that's just me. I rejected a transgender woman after our date. Ada, a little context. I'm a cis lesbian woman who just recently returned to the dating scene. I've been using dating apps and I think it's hurtful to have something like no trans on my profile. Plus, I'm more than open to having trans friends, regardless of the gender they transition to. But I am not attracted to anyone with male genitalia. I matched with a gorgeous woman and we had a lot of mutual interests. I felt like I had finally found someone who I was compatible with, so I asked her out on a date. The chemistry was fantastic in person. It felt like catching up with an old friend rather than meeting a stranger for the first time. Halfway through our date, she disclosed that she's transgender and has had top surgery but isn't sure if she'll ever have bottom surgery. She said that even though she passes as a cis female, she's uncomfortable disclosing that she's trans on her dating profile due to fear of rejection. I was shocked, but not visibly because I didn't want to hurt her feelings. I told her that I was thrilled that she felt comfortable enough sharing that with me and she should always feel safe enough to be who she is around me. We continued with the date and even had a few drinks afterward, enjoying each other's company. At the end of our date, when we were both chatting in our vehicles, she invited me to come back to her place. I told her, I would love to be your friend, but I don't think we should pursue a romantic relationship. She was visibly hurt. She asked why, and I said I didn't think we were compatible. But she kept pushing, deflecting every answer I gave her until I gave in and said it was due to her genitalia. She broke down crying, asking why people won't accept her for who she is. I told her that there is someone out there for her who will love her exactly the way she wants to be loved. I apologized for not being that person, but I would love to remain her friend. She switched up, getting angry and calling me a TERF, then got in her vehicle and left. I felt so bad. I never want to make anyone feel terrible about themselves. I know what that feels like. I need to see if I'm the a-hole. Should I leave my abusive husband? We married 2 years ago. The first month I was here, there was a neighborhood party. A neighbor woman named Julie was there, and she struck me as a bit odd. She never talked to me, but only to my husband. I wanted to go home after a few hours and drinks, but he said there was a bonfire at their house and he wanted to go. So I went home and he took my daughter over to this neighbor lady and her husband's place and they came home pretty late, about 1 a.m. I was miffed because it was my birthday the next day, a Friday, and he forgot and was tired and we didn't do anything to celebrate. Over the next couple weeks, Julie called and texted him a lot to the point it made me uncomfortable and I told him to politely set some boundaries. He never mentioned her again and the texts and calls stopped. I sorta completely forgot Julie existed. Fast forward 2 years. My husband was mad at me and so he left for a business trip and would only say that he left my daughter with trusted people. Normally she just stays home with me. He wouldn't tell me where she was. Yes, I know this is manipulative and a douche move on his part. It was over a week that she was gone and I was seriously sick with worry. Then another neighbor told me she was at Julie's house. This neighbor gave me Julie's phone number and I texted her and asked if my daughter was there but she never replied. My husband also never came home the night his flight came in. He said it was delayed and he slept in his office, but he lied about the arrival time by 5 hours. I watched and when I saw his car at Julie's house, I walked up there. All I said was, is this where she was the whole time? That lady wouldn't look me in the eyes, she just looked down and hurried in the house. She was married and at this time pregnant, too. I was flabbergasted that my husband would leave a 10-year-old overnight with people he drank with at a bonfire once 2 years ago, just because he wanted to upset me. I then found out that Julie and my husband have had some sort of friendship that has lasted at least since that party a couple years ago. Part of me suspects they hung out before I ever moved here. I have to travel frequently to the state I moved from to see my kids. I found out that they hang out with Julie while I'm gone. But no one ever mentioned it to me or invited me along to anything. I think it is weird the kids never even mentioned it. I told my husband how hurt I was. I texted that woman and said I don't know what your relationship was with my husband, but we are married and I am asking you to respect that and leave us alone. She never replied. Christmas was coming up, and me and my husband were traveling to my home state and at the last minute he couldn't go. He promised me that he would not see or talk to her again. I was sad we couldn't be together for Christmas, but had a good time. My husband didn't get me a gift but he is not a gift giver and we are both really busy. I got home and things were better between us. I thought we were both really trying. Then cleaning I found a small piece of Christmas wrapping paper, a present from Julie's young son to my husband. I was upset, but my husband said she just left them on the porch and he seemed upset she did that after I said to stay away. That was a lie, too. A month or so later, I saw a photo on his phone of my husband and my stepdaughter smiling around her dinner table with her friends and husband on Christmas Eve. Apparently, my husband and stepdaughter even went shopping and got her gifts for Christmas. I spent Christmas Eve alone traveling across the country and he never even got me a card. He says it isn't cheating, there was no sex involved and she is married. But then why keep the friendship a secret for 2 years? Why not invite me along to things? Why always wait until I am not around to get together? Something broke in me when I saw that photo. Both my husband and Julie knew how upset I was and it is like they thought it was funny and waited for me to get on that plane to get together and have a good laugh about me. I just can't understand how he could do that to me, his wife, on Christmas. Was this cheating? Anything I can do to move past it? She lives 3 houses down and I swear I have PTSD from it now. I am in a relationship with a single mom and I regret it. I started this relationship 2 years ago when I was 28. Due to the 1-hour drive we only see each other on the weekends. She has her son weekdays and the weekends dad gets her son. I really only see him on Sunday nights when he gets dropped. I was always nice to her son. I would play Minecraft and take him out. Even went on vacation with her and him a couple of times. But I'm not going to lie, I never loved the idea of dealing with him. Despite my attempts at treating him like my own, he has proven time and time again that he's just a difficult kid to deal with. I want to keep this post short so I'll spare the details. But the problem is that recently he's been with us every weekend and I'm starting to get a clearer view into my future with her and her son. I have zero time to myself, there's no intimacy, haven't had it in over a month, and I find myself hiding in the bathroom just to get a moment's peace. I no longer look forward to my weekends. I actually look forward to Monday because at least after work I have a few hours to myself for some peace. I'm starting to realize what my future is looking like and it horrifies me. I tried having a conversation with my girl about it a few times but it always seems to lead to an argument. It's like I have all the responsibilities of a parent, but none of the authority. I really love my girlfriend and we have such a good relationship outside of her son, but now I think it's time for me to end it. I just feel completely awful about the whole thing because I knew she was a single mother before I got into this relationship, but I kept ignoring red flags and kept telling myself it would get better, but it hasn't, it just kept getting worse. I feel like I wasted both of our time but I'm just having trouble letting go. Every time I think about ending it I get scared that I'll miss her too much, but deep down I know that I have too. Any advice or anyone else go through this before? Am I the a-hole for telling my depressed stepdaughter she needs to shower more than once a week? Me and my husband married a while ago. He has a daughter called Sam, and we have a son named Zach. Zach rents an apartment with his boyfriend. Sam lives with us and visits her mom and her mom's BF every other weekend. I adore Sam, I really do. It's so exhilarating to have a daughter to bond with. To put it selfishly, I really do love the woman she's becoming, because she's sweet and generous and quick-witted. We have lots of fun going out together, just the two of us. Like I said, beyond the fun times, I think she's a smart young lady with a generally good head on her shoulders and I'm proud of her for her strength of character. I think we have a strong bond. The only trouble is recently Sam has started to really kick up quite a funk. She's entering that age where teenagers need a couple showers a day to kick off the sweat, but she is very depressed and I'm lucky if she showers once a week. She will either brush her teeth in the morning or night, but beyond that, it's stank breath. If she isn't leaving the house, She usually stays in her sweaty PJs all day and bums around with oily bed head, so most weekends she's with us. She sometimes showers on Friday and then again on Monday. I don't know what goes on at her mother's place in that department. I tried delicately telling Sam she needs to freshen up more often during the day, but she usually just agrees to it, does a couple days of following a proper hygiene schedule, then falls back to her nasty habits. Yesterday she tried to sit next to me at dinner. She smelled positively rank. She had gone running and hadn't bothered to shower when she got home. I told her that I needed to move away from her at the table because of her BO. Sam teared up, which I hated to see, and didn't eat at all. She also didn't leave her bedroom until today around noon. While my husband called me insensitive, he also can't give me a better idea to handle Sam's hygiene issue. Am I the a-hole for making my sister homeless to save my cat's life? My mother treated my sister and I differently. I was always less than, while she could do no wrong. She'd always buy my sister everything she wanted, while I wore her hand-me-downs. I moved out at 18, worked through college, went no contact with mom and low contact with sister, and our paths diverged greatly from there. I now work in a field that pays well, while she is a som. I guess I never quite got over this, and while I know the main asshole is my mother and my sister didn't really know any better, I still fester negative feelings towards both of them. I found Tom in a bag as a newborn kitten. He was the only one still alive and I raised him over summer break when I was 13. Then, when school started, my mother got rid of him and I had to go through great and extreme lengths to find out where she dumped him. Took me a week to find him and we've been together ever since. For a few months Tom hasn't really been okay and has been slowly declining. The vet, however, based on the recent blood panel we did, was confident that he still has some life left to live and said that he's by far the healthiest geriatric cat she's seen in a while. Thus, we decided to try out surgery to improve his quality of life, even though he's 21. This surgery comes with a price tag. I'm not in the US, but it's around 3 months worth of minimum wage in my country. It won't set us back much, hardly an inconvenience, but we'll be frugal just in case complications happen. He's scheduled for Monday, fingers crossed. Anyway, my sister dropped by on Sunday, which was strange. We haven't spoken since she spammed me a Merry Christmas gif on Facebook. Looks like her husband jumped onto the NFT bandwagon and they're kind of broke and a few months behind on mortgage and asked if I could help her out with the payments, since they're at risk of becoming homeless. I said I'm sorry she's going through this, but this is not a good time for me either, and listed the reasons above. I do not want to ever be in a situation where my cat's life depends on $100 that I cannot afford to pay. I suggested she got a job and maybe move in with mother while they get back up on their feet. She did not take this well, called me a jerk and a crazy cat lady that's going to end up alone plus some other nice words. I kicked her out. My mother and other relatives have been spamming me through the week for being heartless and caring more about an animal than my own flesh and blood. My husband says I could have just given her some cash to avoid the drama and he's right. I could have. This is why I feel like I might be the asshole. In the end, the main reason I chose not to help is due to my childhood baggage. Think you can replace me? Good luck. My job was to design and write software prototypes for individual high-value customers. If they liked it well enough, then a real software engineering team would build the real product. Occasionally, I would run the prototype for a few months while the customer evaluated if they wanted to buy the real project. Now these prototypes are not a lot of code, but they do run with a lot of data. Even compressed, it can be a terabyte or more. Having done this work for years, I've accumulated a small disk farm of past projects, which can be very useful when a customer asks for something just like we did last year, but with a small change or two. The company resisted buying hard drives for this, but it saves me so much time. I ended up buying 1 or 2 a year myself until I accumulated about 10 of them. Figure over $1,000 worth of external drives. Then unexpectedly management changes. New management thinks they can replace old software guy with a cheaper new software grad and I am laid off, with 2 weeks to train my replacement. Yes, it's blatant age discrimination, but impossible to fight, so I just went for a graceful transition to my next job. Except, I have $1,000 of personal disk drives with old customer data on them. The company insists that no ex-employees may take any company data off premises and all files must be deleted. I don't want to just leave the drives at the company, but they insist I must delete all data before taking them home. So I offer, they can buy them from me. I will eventually use them for something else, but I can leave the data on them in case someone needs it. Not good enough. New manager insists I must delete all data and all backups before I remove the drives. Okay, that's what I do. 6 months later, I get a series of desperate phone calls. New software grad has been unable to build any new prototypes. Old customers are calling to get old prototypes updated, and new software grad has no idea how to do that. Executive VP is calling to ask what would it take to bring me back to do my old job. Sorry, I've got a new job now, and even if I didn't, I cannot just modify the old prototype because you insisted I delete all old copies of it. If I did want to modify it, I'd first have to recreate it from scratch. The code still exists in their source control, but the data is the heart of the prototypes, and that old series of 6 months apart data we collected is gone for good, no matter what. Sorry, you screwed yourselves exactly like I told you would happen. Hope whatever you saved by hiring a new grad to replace an actual experienced programmer was worth it. Am I the a-hole for sleeping with a child? I'm a babysitter who has been with his family 6 months. I usually work 2 to 8 p.m. Kiddo is 5 years old and in school. She doesn't nap when I'm there and I leave when she goes to bed. Sunday night, I was doing a date night for the parents. Put kiddo to bed at usual bedtime and retired downstairs to watch TV. About an hour later, I hear crying and kiddo calling for me. I head upstairs and she's very upset. I'm pretty sure she had a bad dream, but couldn't vocalize it well. She asked me to stay with her and I agreed. This is potentially where I messed up. I laid beside her and stroked her hair, rubbed her back, etc. in attempt to help her settle. I accidentally fell asleep in the bed because I was so tired. The parents returned later. The dad was very upset when he came in the room and asked why I was in the bed. By this time, I had gotten up and the mom was laying in the bed. I explained she had a nightmare and had asked me to lay with her. He didn't say anything else and I didn't think much of it after that, figuring he understood. I was paid and left. Monday morning, mom boss texted me that kiddo was sick so I didn't have to come in. Figured that might explain her waking up. This morning, dad boss called me and said that they were very disturbed to find me laying in bed. He said it was very inappropriate. I could barely get a word in when I was informed I would have the rest of the week off with pay while they debated my future with their family. This is my first nanny job. I honestly thought this was okay. Was I wrong? Have you ever been romantically involved with a sociopath? Yes, he admitted his diagnosis proudly. He was very troubled. I was only with him 8 months but those 8 months were the worst of my life. He seemed happy to discover I didn't have stable housing. Asked if I'd like to move in. I said no so he started causing problems with the people I was crashing with. I didn't realize this until later that he was the one that got me kicked out. Once I had no choice but to stay with him, in hotels or on the streets. He laughed and said he's breaking his lease. Maybe if I did what he said faster, I'd be able to stay. But I could sleep in his basement. He would do weird shit like that, making me wait outside of bars. His job, his friends' houses was a big thing he'd make me do, especially if the weather was poor. When he drank it was even worse. He'd sleep in the bathroom if he was on liquor to get away from him. If I didn't, he'd strangle me when he blacked out. Hess wanted for killing a girl in another country now. No clue where he is but I'll randomly get contacted by him. It's been years but he still contacts me. All he says is I love you. Once he got into my email and changed my name to I love you. I know 100% it's him. I've seen and been through a lot of effed up shit in my life. It is what it is. But that man takes the effing cake for the most awful experience in my entire life. There are people I meet or see on TV that have the same exact look in their eyes or voice pattern as him, despite looking nothing like him. I avoid those people like the plague or grand to turn the TV off. It's like they over-enunciate certain points of words yet have a monotone voice. The letter T especially. Like they're parroting a human. Not actually one. One thing he always did was watch YouTube videos and practice in the mirror on how to look happy, sad, concerned. It was insane. Everyone thought he was the greatest guy on earth. His mother tried to warn me that he'd kill me. Effed up. What's the most NSFW thing you've seen at a party? I went back to school at 32 and there was this hot 25-year-old I used to flirt with every day before and after class. One day we meet up to get some food before class and she casually mentions she has a husband. After class I'm walking her to her car and it starts raining and she's just like, we should go sit in your car for a few minutes. We get to my car and start chatting and she says something like, you seem a little rough around the edges, like you might be down with people who like to live alternative lifestyles that other people might be judgmental about. Turns out her and her husband were swingers who had a big group of younger swinger friends, and her birthday party was that Friday. I got invited. So I show up, and mind you I'm an alcoholic who's sober at this time, so this is awkward as shit to me not being able to drink to loosen up a bit. But I guess she had been crushing on me big time and all her friends knew who I was. It gets wild around 10:30ish when two people start banging on the pool table butt naked. People are rolling on Molly and there's whippets being passed around. Another chick spread eagle getting finger banged and eaten out on the couch. Around 1 a.m. I'm tired as shit and totally sober. I don't know anyone and I don't know how this swinger thing works so I'm pretty sure I'm not gonna get laid, so I start talking about leaving. But the homeowner is like, bullshit, take your clothes off, that hot girl right there wants to give you a blowjob. And sure enough I turn around and there's a pretty attractive chick my own age sitting on the couch with her top off, patting the seat next to her for me to come sit down. To wrap up this long-winded story I did exactly that. Sat down, introduced myself, got naked, got a blowjob on the couch in front of a few dozen people. Some other girl came and sat down on the other side of me, put her leg over mine and started playing with herself. I should probably mention there was a big bowl of rubbers in the kitchen and literally everyone I saw, including myself, was playing safe. Later I ended up going upstairs and banging this other girl for like an hour while another couple watched and jerked each other off. I didn't end up leaving until 7 a.m. My abs were sore as shit and I was tired as F, and there was still a literal orgy going on in one of the bedrooms when I popped my head in to say goodbye and thanks. Imagine 6 people all getting each other off and politely stopping to say, bye, nice to meet you, thanks for coming, drive safe. And then going right back to doing what they were doing. It was a trip. I might have to sue my school. I went to middle/high school in Texas over a decade ago and don't currently live in that state. For personal reasons I have avoided all contact with anyone from the school, alumni association, former teachers, etc. Recently, I learned that the school's website, Instagram and Facebook pages had posted my middle and high school photos as a composite with a portrait off my employer's website, sort of like a look where they are now thing. The composite is part of the alumni landing page on the school website. My work photo is of me wearing a distinctive uniform and name badge and is not particularly easy to find online, but it is somewhere on my employer's web directory. I do not have the same name and look significantly different now as compared to school photos. My employer states they were never contacted by the school. My work uses a photography service with their own media release which explicitly requires written permission for any third-party use. I sent a polite email to the school requesting the photos be taken down. The reply I got was to the effect of, "We wish you well, but permission has been granted for fair use as per the documents attached." They had sent a scanned PDF of a media release permission slip signed by my parent about 15 years ago, with a highlighted section stating I irrevocably authorize, school, to use the photograph or any print or digital alterations thereof for current or future publication. The photo file itself was also attached, all 3 images mashed together as one file, except a white bar had been added on the bottom with date of middle school photo. Needless to say, this is ridiculous. I haven't yet replied to that email. Ever since the photo was posted, I have been getting unsolicited FB requests and DMs from people which I all ignore. Worse, my employer has started getting phone calls asking if, former name, works there. I feel very uncomfortable that my current profession and personal details are being promoted for the school without my permission. I really don't want anyone else from my hometown to connect my current and former lives. I am looking for some guidance on who could help me sort this out and if it might be worth going to civil court for. A lawyer acquaintance told me that I could prove no damages, but I'm not sure. Thanks. This will probably be the only update as I'm considering my next steps, but I appreciated all the good advice I got the last time. Someone had actually recommended I ask my employer's photography service to contact my school with a DMCA notice. I did not reach out to the school directly. Someone from the school's IT department replied to my email and not the photography service the next day. Their email was basically with their claims as below. I am paraphrasing because I don't want to use the exact language. The photograph is the property of the school and they can do what they please with it. I found my boss's highly critical notes about a coworker. After 10 years of working together, my direct manager, our director of operations, Jessica, was let go from our company a few months ago. There were apparently some behind-the-scenes issues between herself and our CEO, Bruce. He alluded as much to me and others in conversation, I think in an attempt at transparency, that led to this result. Bruce had the replacement for Jessica set to start less than a week after Jessica was let go. She was let go on a Tuesday. My new manager Elizabeth started the following Monday, which leads me to believe that this change was in the works for well over a month. Due to the notice Elizabeth would have had to give at her previous job. I don't know if I can communicate how sudden Jessica's termination was. It was a surprise to everyone but especially to Lila, who is one of Jessica's best friends and who works as a manager. When Elizabeth first started, one of the tasks at the top of her list was meeting with the managers and department heads to get a feel for the organization. But the meeting with Lila took place after hours and from what I heard of it, it was not polite or professionally handled. I work after usual business hours and the doors to my office and the conference room were both open. Elizabeth and Bruce were quite aggressive toward Lila. Thankfully, another manager, Mandy, was also in the meeting and was able to give Lila a little support and a chance to take a breath. The meeting eventually seemed to calm down, and I closed my door once I realized what I was hearing, and I have chalked it up to Elizabeth being primed by others, possibly Bruce, to take a defensive position due to Lila's close friendship with Jessica. This is my conundrum. I went to our communal supply closet last evening to get some notepads. There weren't any fresh, new ones, but I was looking for scratch paper for myself and don't mind using up the dregs of someone else's old notepad. I grabbed a few remnants and went back to my desk. When sorting through the notepads quickly to clean up any loose pieces, I noticed that one had writing on the second page down. I flipped the page up, intending to remove and shred whatever notes were on there. The notes that I saw were Elizabeth's notes from, or possibly after, that first meeting with Lila. I'm sure I won't shock you by telling you that the notes, at a glance, once I realized what they were not flattering to Lila in the least. Some pertained to her work performance, but others were very crude, and inaccurate, assessments of Lila's personality and what Elizabeth did not like about her. There was also a page after those notes with some jotted down info from a high-level meeting that Elizabeth attended, again, at a quick glance. I don't know what to do now. Should I pretend I never saw the notes, shred them, and keep my mouth shut? Should I take the notepad to Elizabeth and explain how I ended up with it, allowing her to destroy the notes herself? I could even play it more as, funny thing, I grabbed this old notepad from the supply closet and it looks like you still have some notes on here. Did you want to check them to see if you still need them? But of course, she will want to know if I saw what the notes were about. It is very fortunate that I was the one who came across this information as I work at the manager level, with clearance and responsibilities to match, and previously did HR-esque work for the company. I suppose my biggest issue here is wondering, if Elizabeth made notes like that about Lila, what kind of notes did she make about me after our first encounter? I can't ask her that, but I worry that bringing up the Lila notes to Elizabeth will cause her to mistrust me. To be very clear, I have no intention of telling Lila or anyone else about what I saw. Elizabeth and Lila seem to have evened out a bit and their relationship is maybe not the best in the world, but it is certainly better than when Elizabeth first started. I don't want to cause issues or drama, I just want a good working relationship with my new boss. Can't wait until Thursday, my wife is going to be shocked. So, wife and I have been together 17 years. We are still stupid for each other, and she is the absolute love of my life, best friend, confidant, and co-conspirator. About 2 years ago she started having joint aches and pains, and some minor swelling in her hands, wrists, ankles, etc. So off we got to the GP, who gives us a consult to a rheumatologist. Come to find out, she has rheumatoid arthritis. No worries, she starts treatment. Fast forward to a month ago, when our North Texas weather decided to go full mental, and start changing temps and rain/weather by the hour it seemed. She woke up after overnight temp changes and thunderstorms, and her hands were huge. Worse, her small petite fingers looked like sausages. And even though she had been previously warned about this, had slept in her wedding ring. So, off to the doctor's office, where they had to cut off her ring. So, now for the bad, our rings were special ordered from Ireland and custom designed, and have words in Gaelic around the exterior of the ring, negating any type of repair, and they were designed and made 17 years ago. She was absolutely gutted. I assured her we would figure it out, and it wasn't a big deal, but I could tell, to her, it was. Begin Sherlock Holmes mode. I googled until I couldn't Google anymore. I was able to find that the original jeweler had closed up shop 10 plus years ago just due to age. I searched some more. I finally found his personal Facebook page, and I message him, and wait. I finally get a response from his daughter, that she had noticed a pending message on her DA's page, and that he passed away just 6 months ago. I express my condolences, and she asks what was the purpose of my inquiry. I go into this long diatribe about what had happened, etc. She tells me she understands, and is so sorry about what had happened. Fast forward a couple of weeks, I get a message on Facebook from an unknown person, until she explains this was the daughter of the jeweler. She explains that she went through all her dad's designs and looked up the approximate dates, and thinks she found the drawings, details, and molds in her dad's things, and wanted me to confirm. She sent pictures, and I confirmed that yes, those are our rings. She said she would get all of this to us as soon as possible, and asked for our address. I opened my email this morning to find tracking information, and pictures, of our rings. She went ahead and had her brother, who had taken over her father's business, make our wedding bands again, in her original size, and 2 extra in 2 larger sizes in case her condition causes her fingers to swell/change, and mailed them out to us, at no charge. I asked why they did both as mine was fine, and she said it would not be fair that my wife had to have a new ring, and I was allowed to keep my old one. She told me we needed to put our original set away, and to enjoy our new wedding bands. I asked about compensation, and she said she was honored to keep her dad's work and spirit alive. Our new wedding bands will be here Thursday. Trying to think of romantic way to present her with them as she has no idea any of this took place.
Dads of Reddit, how did you find out that your daughter was a slut in high school? I was picking my 16-year-old daughter up from her dance practice, and I start talking to see how she is doing in school. She says that this semester was her best yet, and that she got a 2.5 GPA. My daughter is really stupid, so I see this as a win. Anyways, when we get home, I see bruises all over her foot, and I ask her what happened today. She said nothing really, and she proceeds to get on with her day. A few minutes later, she says, "Dad, we need to go to the doctor's office. I have bumps on my private area." I am curious and say, "Wow, this is serious. We need to go tomorrow." So I drive her to the doctor and get the report back that she is positive for about every STD imaginable. The doctor also adds that her coochie has been stretched to the maximum and that he believes the number of partners she has slept with is in the triple digits. I ask how this is even possible, as I didn't even think that was remotely possible. Anyways, I found out that she has her own business in the bathroom stalls that for $100 she will bang you for 10 minutes. As a father, I was extremely frustrated and took away her ice cream privileges for a week, and she now has to help me mow the lawn. Months went by, and despite my efforts to keep a close eye on my daughter, it seemed like she was slipping further into a reckless lifestyle. The minor punishments I doled out, taking away her phone for a day or grounding her for a weekend, proved ineffective. She was determined to live her life on her own terms. Consequences be damned. I tried having heart-to-heart conversations, expressing my concerns and emphasizing the importance of self-respect and making responsible choices, but it was as if my words fell on deaf ears. My daughter was determined to explore her newfound freedom with consequences yet to be felt. Then one day I received a call from the school principal. I was asked to come in for an urgent meeting. Anxiety gnawed at my insides as I made my way to the school, dreading what I might hear. The principal's office felt stifling, and the air hung heavy with tension. I took a seat, my palms clammy, and listened as the principal began to speak. "We have uncovered a deeply troubling situation involving your daughter," the principal started, their voice filled with a mix of concern and disappointment. My heart sank. "What happened?" The principal hesitated, then continued. "It has come to our attention that your daughter has been involved in an intimate relationship with one of her teachers." Shockwaves coursed through my veins, and I felt anger, betrayal, and despair swirling inside me. How could this happen? How did I fail to protect her? Tears welled up in my eyes as I struggled to comprehend the enormity of the situation. I managed to find my voice, choked with emotion. What are you going to do about it?" The principal assured me that they were taking the matter seriously and would be launching a thorough investigation. But in that moment, their words offered little comfort. I felt like I had lost my daughter to a world I couldn't understand or control. Days turned into weeks as the investigation unfolded, and the truth gradually emerged. It was a painful process, filled with questions, interviews, and the unsettling revelation of an abuse of power. The teacher involved faced severe consequences, but the damage had already been done. As a father, I grappled with feelings of guilt and responsibility. What more could I have done to protect my daughter? How did I miss the signs? The weight of those questions pressed upon me relentlessly. In the aftermath, I sought professional help for my daughter. Therapy became a vital part of her healing process, providing a safe space for her to confront the emotional turmoil that she had endured. For me, it was a time of reflection and growth. I had to learn to let go of my anger and accept that my daughter's choices were ultimately her own. Punishments and restrictions could only go so far. What she needed was love, support, and guidance. Our journey towards healing was far from over, but we navigated it together, hand in hand. My daughter began to rebuild her life, and I found solace in knowing that I would always be there for her no matter what. It was a painful lesson, one that reminded me of the importance of empathy, understanding, and open communication. As a father, I realized that sometimes love means giving space for mistakes, but always offering a hand to help pick up the pieces. Months turned into years, and my daughter's journey took unexpected turns that left me feeling both bewildered and disheartened. As she turned 18, she made a decision that shattered my hopes and pushed the boundaries of my understanding. I stumbled across her adult entertainment videos purely by accident, my curiosity leading me down an internet rabbit hole. The shock that washed over me was overwhelming. There she was, my own flesh and blood, engaging in explicit acts, pushing the limits of her body and her self-expression. I couldn't help but feel a surge of disappointment and sadness. I had hoped for a different path for her, one filled with stability and self-respect. Seeing her cover herself with Sharpie or engage in other peculiar acts left me feeling utterly lost. I couldn't understand why she chose this path for herself. In the midst of my confusion and frustration, I reached out to her. We sat down together, and I poured out my emotions, struggling to find the right words. I expressed my disappointment, my concerns, and my genuine fear for her well-being. To my surprise, her response wasn't one of defensiveness or defiance. Instead, she looked at me with eyes filled with both vulnerability and strength. "Dad, this is who I am. I understand your disappointment, but I need you to accept me for who I am." Her words hit me like a punch to the gut. It was a wake-up call, a moment of realization that I had been so caught up in my own expectations and judgments that I had failed to truly see my daughter for who she was becoming, an individual with her own desires, dreams, and choices. Times had been tough for me, and as I struggled to make ends meet, I found myself swallowing my pride and turning to her for financial support. It was a difficult decision, one that tested the limits of our relationship. As I hesitantly approached her, seeking assistance, she looked at me with a mixture of compassion and understanding, and in that moment, I saw the resilience that had been forged within her through her own struggles. "Dad, I'll help you," she said softly, "but it comes with a condition. You have to accept me as I am, without judgment or resentment. I need you to see beyond my choices and love me unconditionally." With a heavy heart, I accepted her condition. It was a pivotal moment in our relationship, one that required me to let go of my preconceived notions and open my heart to love without conditions. The end.
Ida Forgiving My Parents, a book on cheating. I love my mom, 35. But when I was 10 she had an affair and left us. I visited her as often as I could and she always seemed so happy when I was there, but I hated her new family so I stopped visiting. Honestly, we rarely ever saw each other after just for my birthday and events really. She wants us to be close but I want nothing to do with her new husband so I've kept my distance. Except on February 20th my dad announced he'd be out on business till the 12th and my grandparents are stuck visiting relatives in Italy and so I really had nowhere to go and my mom jumped at the chance to have me stay with her. And just my luck that my mom's anniversary with her husband was on Sunday. I haven't had a good time here at all so all I do is stay in my room doing homework or go out with friends to avoid family activities cause it sucks seeing how lovey-dovey she is with her husband and how they seem like the perfect family with their daughters. The morning before her anniversary day she came to my bed and tried to cuddle with me like before she left us but it made me angry like we can't go back in time and pretend it's how it was. So I just pretended to be asleep and stayed curled up and frozen till she left. I started crying cause of that and I felt angry and snarky and my mom majored in literature so I got her a copy of Anna Karenina for her anniversary. That book's about a lady who leaves her husband and son for her lover. I've never read it but I watched the movie with my girlfriend and I hated it. The anniversary party was on Sunday. Everyone was having fun but me and then people gave their gifts. I gave mine and when my mom saw what it was she seemed shocked but just said, "Thanks." The party ended like an hour after. But at night when she was in her room I heard her crying really loudly. So I kinda eavesdropped a little and heard her saying stuff about that book and me and her husband trying to calm her. The next day at breakfast she left for work early before I woke up and her husband straight up called me an asshole and other stuff for gifting them that. It's been a few days now and my mom has barely talked to me. Honestly I feel so wrong I made my mom cry but at the same time I don't want to be here and she knows that so am I really the a-hole? Debt collectors want to see my father-in-law. Well here you go. For a small bit of context my father-in-law died about 2 years ago. He was living with us at the time due to health issues. About 6 months after his death we started getting letters from debt collectors asking for stupid amounts of money. We did as asked and provided a copy of his death certificate and were told it was sorted. He didn't have much money and covered his funeral. Father-in-law wanted to be cremated so we did as asked and had him stashed in a cupboard under the stairs. Wife has put his ashes under a tree but saved some for if we ever move. A few weeks ago we had several suited men turn up at our house. I go out the back door and walk to the front of our house, Smallhold Farm. I ask the men what they are doing on my property and they say they're here to collect on an outstanding debt. I ask to see their paperwork. Only debt we have is a mortgage which we paid on time without fail. As I'm looking over the paperwork they're looking over at my car, work equipment etc. looking like they've hit a jackpot. I noticed the name was father-in-law and explained to them he'd been dead for about 2 years. They demanded to see him as they have no record of this and that they will take items to cover his debts. I pull out my phone and text my wife to call the police because of trespassers, and I ask her to put her dad's ashes on the front porch. I tell the debt collectors I've contacted her father and he will be with us shortly, and until he is here they are to wait off my property as I'm the homeowner. I had to show them my ID to prove I wasn't the man they were looking for. Once the police turned up they all drove back onto my property and I fetched the box of ashes. The debt collectors asked again if they could speak to father-in-law, so I then handed them the bag of ashes which had a label that reads the remains of father-in-law and the date. I looked the main debt collector in the face and said, I told you he was dead several times and you still asked to see him. Hope you guys have a good chat and are able to sort out this mess. Oh, and while you're speaking to him, can you ask him where he left my spare workshop key? I turned to the police and explained how I've also asked them to get off my property several times and they refused because they needed to see my father-in-law. They hand back the ashes and are getting ready to leave. I looked at the police officer and he burst out laughing. And the officer asks if they will be coming back or are they satisfied with this evidence. They claim to be happy with it. I have now added a lock to my main gate and an intercom. This morning I get a buzz just as I'm getting set up for the morning's work. Same debt collection company wanting again to see father-in-law. I grab the box of ashes and copies of the death certificate and head down to the main gate, 2 suited gentlemen and a very large van blocking my gate. I've driven down in my van and I get out of the box and papers in hand. I again explain that he is dead. I show his death certificate and they again ask to speak to him. So I hand over the box and ask for their head office phone number. I stand in front of them calling their boss and explain that I've shown them the death certificate and his ashes. How do they expect him to pay his debts now he's dead? They have assured me that they will not be returning. I disinvited my adopted sister for my wedding. I am the youngest of 2 children. My parents always wanted a big family, but they had a string of miscarriages, so they turned to adoption. They had a baby girl through a closed adoption. 7 months after they adopted my sister, they conceived me. My parents said I was their miracle baby. For context, my parents and I are white. My sister is Hispanic and black. Growing up, my sister and I were best friends. We did everything together, and people said we acted like twins. We stayed best friends into adulthood, until she found her biological family. At first, I was happy for her. My sister always said that she felt like something was missing, and finding her family seemed to be the missing piece. But then she started to treat my parents differently. She would constantly berate them for choosing to adopt, because she said adoption, especially transracial adoption, was wrong. She said that the experience was traumatizing to her, and that she wasn't properly prepared for being a POC due to their color blindness. I stayed out of it, because her relationship with my parents wasn't my business. But when she made my mom cry after a particularly cruel remark, I started distancing myself from her. For context, she said that they should have gotten therapy for their infertility, instead of becoming baby snatchers. Even though we weren't friends anymore, I couldn't imagine severing the relationship. And I definitely couldn't imagine disinviting her for my wedding. She was the one who introduced me to my fiancé after all. So I told myself that she was my sister no matter what, and kept her as my maid of honor. I changed my mind after she posted a picture of herself with her biological siblings. She captioned it, "It's been such a relief to find my real family. I finally feel like I'm home." I was beyond upset. I never, ever thought of her as anything less than my sister. But apparently, I was never a sister to her. I didn't trust myself to call her, so I sent a text. "Since you don't see me as your real sister, there's no reason for you and her boyfriend's name here to come to my wedding." I blocked her number after that. She blocked me on everything in response. Our mutual friends are telling me that she's calling me a racist. I don't think there's any way to come back from this. I'm heartbroken about losing my sister, and I'm heartbroken that I never had one in the first place. Married cheaters, how is your affair going? My husband and I were going through a rough patch, and we're increasingly going out with friends in order to avoid facing our problems, or fighting. We got to where we were spending a minimal time together. He went out with his friends on a trip for the weekend, and when he returned I asked him if he was happier when he was away, as he did not text or call me the whole time he was gone. During this period, there was a friend that I had that gave me increasing attention. I told him I was married, that nothing would happen between us unless my husband and I decided on separation. However, I did express that there were feelings there, and we began to act as though we were in the beginning stages of a relationship, often flirting, occasionally holding hands, going to him for my problems instead of my husband. My marriage came to a head, and my husband and I had a talk about whether or not we were going to stay together. He cried, and I realized how nice it was to feel as though he cared about me, as I had felt neglected for some time. We decided we were going to spend 3 days together, without fighting, and while trying to make each other as happy as possible. And if at the end of these 3 days, we still wanted to end it, we would. At the end of the 3 days, after some intimacy was reestablished in the relationship and we were going to try and make it work, I told my friend that I could not talk to or see him again. I felt incredible guilt for the betrayal I had put into my marriage, and couldn't live with myself. I cried myself to sleep for months every night, knowing that if I told my husband what I had done, he would leave me, and I did not want to give up on my marriage. Eventually, I realized I could not deal with the pain of the guilt. I respected him too much to keep this secret, so I told him, through tears, that I had an emotional affair, and I was just so sorry. I just felt so alone. He stopped me, before I finished telling him everything, and told me, "I forgive you for anything you've done, and anything you could have done." What was your best or worst time in a game of truth or dare? I was dared to cover the head of my PP with cayenne pepper, then close my foreskin over top of it. I was 13 to 14 at the time and was in a situation that would have looked really bad to my foster parents. Ironically, about 5 minutes after I did the deed, my foster parents pulled up to the house. So everyone playing scattered, but I had a dick full of cayenne pepper and it was burning, like a lot. But it gets worse. My friend that was over for the night decides to do it as well because I look like I'm being dramatic. He didn't use as much as me, but we both were in so much pain and regretted everything. So we decided we were gonna go get cleaned up. Me first because I did it first. Except for one kinda big problem. My foster dad worked in construction, then go to my foster mom's business and would help her until she closed. Then he would come home and shower immediately, then go to bed. He would get angry if you tried to shower after he had gone to bed, cause the bathroom was right next to his room, and the pipes were extremely loud. So by the time I got upstairs to get cleaned up, he was walking towards the only bathroom with a towel in hand. I had to tell my foster mom I was doing the PP dance cause I was moving around so much and looked so uncomfortable. I couldn't tell my foster parents the truth, cause that would involve them knowing that we were playing truth or dare and had a fit. I went outside to pee but actually just left my wang hanging in the cool wind to help with the burning sensation that wouldn't go away. I also tried to scoop some of it off. Yes, I used that much, because I'm an idiot, that's why, but if I touched it too hard it was just burning more and felt even more uncomfortable. So I got the genius idea to grab 2 glasses of water, take them down for my friend and we would get cleaned up downstairs in my room, then just dump the cayenne dick water out the window. Sounds great, right? I get the water downstairs, and my friend is already in my room, using one of my deodorant sticks on his junk to try and counter the burning. So he rubbed his sweaty cayenne pepper dick all over my deodorant I used for school after gym. By the look on his face, I could tell he could give less than a fuck about it. I couldn't really either cause I was focused on cleaning myself up. I hand my buddy his glass, and we clean ourselves up to the best of our abilities, dump out the cayenne dick water, and then go to bed. The next morning, we go upstairs for breakfast and bring our glasses up. I went to put mine in the sink, and my foster dad said something like, "Don't grab another glass, we don't need any more dirty dishes than we already have." And so I said, "Oh no, I'm just washing hours before dinner." He says, "Why? You just had water, right? It's not even dirty." And because I have social anxiety and didn't want to talk about this any more than I already was, I just said, "Yeah, I guess you're right." We both filled our glasses with water, didn't touch them. Then I got yelled at for wasting drinking water. We had to buy our water from in town cause our well water was salt water. And yes, I forgot about the cayenne dick deodorant and put it on at school. It burned and chaffed my armpits during flag football. Worst fucking game of truth or dare I ever played. What is the most disturbing thing that has ever happened in your area? An elementary school 2 streets away from me. Their class goes on a field trip somewhere on the countryside. One girl complains about stomachy pain. The teachers give her an over-the-counter painkiller and some water and hope for the best. All of a sudden she collapses and starts to scream. Teachers call an ambulance, thinking her appendix is bursting or something. When the ambulance arrives, they quickly come to the conclusion that this 11-year-old girl is giving birth. She gives birth in the ambulance. All the parents get called to pick up their kids. The girl gets sent to the hospital and social services are called. One of the parents apparently leaked it to the local press and that evening it was already on the national news. My mom heard it all from the neighbors when they picked up their kid. We felt horrible about it and thought that was that. Next day, several vans of TV news channels and newspapers park at the elementary school. If I walked to the end of my garden in my old house, I could see the parking area and the back of the school clearly. Those reporters all started to harass kids when the parents dropped them off at school. What do you think about this? Did you know she was pregnant? Who do you think the father is? The school called the cops. All the vans had to go of the school property but they just moved them around the corner and waited till school was done and harassed the kids even more. Some fame-hungry parents and kids jumped in front of the camera. Several things got leaked to the press. The girl lived with her dad in a single-parent household with her slightly older half-brother. Their mom was nowhere to be found. She just dropped off the kids one day and went back to her home country. The dad did lose custody over his much older daughter when she was still a minor due to accusations that he forced himself onto her. This older daughter was the half-sister to the little girl. She was at least 25 when this happened and did not live with him, of course. A police officer confirmed on the national news that they were doing DNA testing and the most likely suspect was her half-brother. Both her half-brother, who was still a minor, and her father were held in custody. Due to the siblings sharing obvious DNA and the baby also being related, they had to do some more advanced tests that took longer. Then after a week or two, confirmation came that the father of the girl was also the father of the baby by the national news. The half-sister also confirmed in an interview that the dad forced himself onto her and that she knew he would also do it to the little girl at some point. How and why he had the custody over the 2 kids, nobody knows. The public went feral. The house of this family was in my neighborhood, so I all saw and heard what happened. Windows got smashed, fireworks and smoke bombs thrown into the house. Graffiti was used to tag the house with names among other things. The little girl was taken into custody by social services and adopted out to a family somewhere on the other side of the country along with her daughter. They also got their names changed. The father was charged with 3 years prison time. What is something really cute that the opposite gender does? When a girl wants to be the big spoon. Seriously, it's like having a soft, warm backpack that nuzzles the back of your neck, and most guys enjoy it as much as girls. Plus we don't get a curtain of hair in our face. Plus, the almighty lumps are pressed against our back. That's pretty great too. My boyfriend looks freaking adorable when he's sick. Not when he's coughing up a lung or dying, but when he has a regular cold and he's weak and can't do anything by himself. He's normally this built 6'2" guy who towers over me, but when I have to help him, I go all putty, smiling at his own dorky joke, like it's so cute. In fact, big ol' wide goofy smiles and laughs in general. I know plenty of guys who try to be hard and tough and frown in every photo. It's not really attractive. I think it's kind of cute when a guy is afraid of spiders or something and he freaks out a little bit when one gets on him but then tries to play it off. I really like it when a girl yawns. It's this moment of total vulnerability, something she has no control over. My ex's smile. Her boyfriend before me was extremely awful to her, and she told me all the things he had said to her. One was that her teeth were messed up so she shouldn't smile. So when I met her, she was accustomed to not smiling, or talking about herself. After months of slowly trying to break her of that habit, and ensuring her that her smile was beautiful and infectious, she would laugh and smile at me when she thought I wasn't looking. I saw it every time. When they touch you absent-mindedly, my boyfriend never even realizes it, but it's like I'm magnetic or something. He plays with my hair, or makes sure our legs touch when he's gaming and I'm watching. I just found out that my father baby-trapped my mother with me. I grew up thinking my mother had abandoned us. That is what he always told me. He told me my mother packed up and left us when I turned 2 years old. I grew up to resent and hate her, mainly because I saw how my father was working super long hours to make ends meet. I hated how my grandma basically had to raise me. When I would ask her about my mother, my grandma painted a picture of a bitter, spiteful, hateful, spoiled and entitled woman. I felt very justified in my anger and hate for her. That's what my family told me and I had absolutely no reason to doubt them. A few weeks ago I found her on social media while at my boyfriend's house, and I was so mad. She was out there living her best life. She is a cook in a Michelin star restaurant. She travels, has a huge apartment, and apparently is married to a gorgeous man. In a fit of rage, I DM'd her cruising her out for abandoning me to live her frivolous life and that karma would come to her. She obviously saw it. Instead of going off on me, she just asked me to meet her and that she felt like I had a right to express my anger to her in person and that she owed me as much. I was starstruck because my father said she never stood for the consequences of her actions. Without telling anyone, I agreed. She invited me to this amazing restaurant. She paid an Uber for me and everything. It was very awkward at the beginning. I kept berating her. I was so angry. I cried a little. She just sat there and took it all in. I then asked her why she abandoned me. She then asked, "Do you really want to know the whole story? It is not nice and you will not like it. I am ready to be the bad guy in your head forever and keep my distance." I just kept pressing her. And then she told me the real story. She told me that my father and she met shortly before ending uni. At that time my mother had said she did not want to stay in uni town. A few months after dating, my father told her that his landlord was evicting him because the apartment was needed for immediate family use. She offered him to stay while he found something else. Months passed and he was not doing anything. Then she got a job offer in another country. She told my father that he could take over her apartment or come with her. They had this huge fight where my mother told him that she was not ready for the type of commitment he wanted. She wanted different things in life than him and that as much as she loved him, that they weren't compatible. They stayed living together and then one day she found out she was pregnant. She told me honestly that she was thinking of not having me. She did not feel ready to be a mom at 22. She did not feel maternal feelings. She said she was already struggling with depression and late diagnosed ADHD. My father convinced her to have me. He said he would take me because he had a right to me, that he would go after her because that baby was also his. So she had me. She said that the time after birth was really bad. My father was dragging out the legal procedures. He refused to vacate the home. My mother said that while she felt love for me and that there were moments when she felt overjoyed, it was overshadowed by huge waves of self-deletion ideation. She was scared that she was going to hurt me. She also showed me some of the court documents of that time that backed up her claims. In the end, she was so desperate that she agreed to stay with my father if he agreed to be the main caretaker. He did, but only half tried. My mother then told me that it got so bad that she tried to take her life around my second birthday after a particularly nasty fight where my father admitted to having tampered with her birth control. She showed me the papers of the involuntary 72 hours commitment and the legal documents where she was found unfit to be a parent. Afterward, I felt nauseous after all that. I would have not believed her, hadn't she brought so much evidence with her. She then asked me what I meant in my message that we were struggling. I told her that we were not exactly rich and that I was struggling to come up with the money to go to university in another city. She was bewildered and asked me what my father had been doing with the monthly payments she was making. I told her that we don't receive that money. Then she took out another stack of papers. She is sending child support every month. It is almost $3,000 every month. What is the dumbest thing you have tricked someone into believing? About a year ago, I was taking off the remnants of a peel-off mask I put a little bit on my shoulders. My boyfriend walked in and asked me what I was doing. And for some reason I joked and said, "Oh, I'm shedding my skin since I just finished my period." He was really confused, but believed me immediately and started asking a ton of questions. I decided it would be funny to stick with the joke and answer all the questions. Here's how it went. "So why do you have to do that?" "Well, you know how girls shed the lining of their womanhood during their periods? It's kind of the same thing, but since skin doesn't contract, we have to peel it off." "Does it hurt?" "Only a little bit, but it's such a relief when it's off." "Do all girls have this?" "Yes, but we're all kind of ashamed of it because a lot of guys shame us for it, so don't ask girls around you about it." My poor gullible baby boy. Well, once, he mentioned it around one of my best girlfriends. I gave her a look from across the room, and she went with it. And then he mentioned it in front of his sister. I gave her a look, she went with it, and then told their mom to go along with it later if he ever asked. This spread around quickly. His aunt, my mother, my sisters, my female cousins, his female cousins, his grandmother, all of my female friends, all of his sister's female friends, everyone. While all of this happened, his male friends found out about it. One of them asked their moms, and she laughed at him and didn't say anything. So he believes it. The others still believe it without question. This had spread like a wildfire that I could not control. At this point, I had completely forgotten about the joke, but earlier today, I was sitting at the dinner table with him and his family just chatting, and I was scratching my shoulder because I got a really bad sunburn and it was starting to peel. He asked me if my sunburn was bothering me and if I wanted some aloe vera, so I said yes. He said to me in front of the entire table, "It must suck that your sunburn is peeling and you have to peel this time of the month again." It took everything in me to not burst out laughing, but it took absolutely nothing for his mother to snort water out of her nose and proceed to laugh at the dinner table. His sister buried her face in her hands and laughed so hard that her face turned bright red and she snorted over and over again. Much to my surprise, I did not laugh, but I felt myself convulse and my face got so hot. He was really confused, but his dad was even more confused. He asked him what he was talking about, and my poor boyfriend, who was so confused as to why his sister and mom were laughing, said, "Well, you know. When girls have that time, they have to peel. Right?" And his dad just looked at all three of us dumbfounded and said, "What the hell have you been telling this boy?" And we all lost it. I started laughing so hard that I thought I was going to throw up. I was crying, I was in pain, I probably burst a couple blood vessels from laughing so hard. I finally fessed up because I couldn't explain my maniacal laughter anymore. He looked at me like I just shot his dog. I told him I was so sorry and explained the origin of this running joke. He sat back down at the table absolutely dumbfounded. After dinner we went back to his room and he asked me, "Everyone has been lying to me about this and you started it." I felt so bad, and I was apologizing profusely. He was silent for about a minute before he started laughing harder than I have ever heard him laugh before. He had tears rolling down his cheeks, his face was bright red, and he kept grabbing his stomach and heaving from how hard he was laughing. He told me between heaves that he couldn't believe that I had gotten every single woman in his life to convince him that this complete BS was real, and that he wouldn't believe periods were real at this point if he hadn't witnessed me curled up in the bathroom sobbing from cramps. What is the dumbest thing you have tricked someone into believing? About a year ago, I was taking off the remnants of a peel-off mask I put a little bit on my shoulders. My boyfriend walked in and asked me what I was doing, and for some reason I joked and said, "Oh, I'm shedding my skin since I just finished my period." He was really confused, but believed me immediately and started asking a ton of questions. I decided it would be funny to stick with the joke and answer all the questions. Here's how it went. "So why do you have to do that?" "Well, you know how girls shed the lining of their womanhood during their periods? It's kind of the same thing, but since skin doesn't contract, we have to peel it off." "Does it hurt?" "Only a little bit, but it's such a relief when it's off." "Do all girls have this?" "Yes, but we're all kind of ashamed of it because a lot of guys shame us for it, so don't ask girls around you about it." My poor gullible baby boy. Well, once, he mentioned it around one of my best girlfriends. I gave her a look from across the room, and she went with it. And then he mentioned it in front of his sister. I gave her a look, she went with it, and then told their mom to go along with it later if he ever asked. This spread around quickly. His aunt, my mother, my sisters, my female cousins, his grandmother, all of my female friends, all of his sister's female friends, everyone. While all of this happened, his male friends found out about it. One of them asked their moms, and she laughed at him and didn't say anything. So he believes it. The others still believe it without question. This had spread like a wildfire that I could not control. At this point, I had completely forgotten about the joke, but earlier today, I was sitting at the dinner table with him and his family just chatting, and I was scratching my shoulder because I got a really bad sunburn and it was starting to peel. He asked me if my sunburn was bothering me and if I wanted some aloe vera, so I said yes. He said to me in front of the entire table, "It must suck that your sunburn is peeling and you have to peel this time of the month again." It took everything in me to not burst out laughing, but it took absolutely nothing for his mother to snort water out of her nose and proceed to laugh at the dinner table. His sister buried her face in her hands and laughed so hard that her face turned bright red and she snorted over and over again. Much to my surprise, I did not laugh, but I felt myself convulse and my face got so hot. He was really confused, but his dad was even more confused. He asked him what he was talking about, and my poor boyfriend, who was so confused as to why his sister and mom were laughing, said, "Well, you know. When girls have that time, they have to peel. Right?" And his dad just looked at all three of us dumbfounded and said, "What the hell have you been telling this boy?" And we all lost it. I started laughing so hard that I thought I was going to throw up. I was crying, I was in pain, I probably burst a couple blood vessels from laughing so hard. I finally fessed up because I couldn't explain my maniacal laughter anymore. He looked at me like I just shot his dog. I told him I was so sorry and explained the origin of this running joke. He sat back down at the table absolutely dumbfounded. After dinner we went back to his room and he asked me, "Everyone has been lying to me about this and you started it." I felt so bad, and I was apologizing profusely. He was silent for about a minute before he started laughing harder than I have ever heard him laugh before. He had tears rolling down his cheeks, his face was bright red, and he kept grabbing his stomach and heaving from how hard he was laughing. He told me between heaves that he couldn't believe that I had gotten every single woman in his life to convince him that this complete BS was real, and that he wouldn't believe periods were real at this point if he hadn't witnessed me curled up in the bathroom sobbing from cramps. Fiancée wanted an open marriage, so I called off the wedding. 2 weeks ago we were 2 weeks away from getting married. She asked me to go to therapy with her. She was already seeing a therapist on her own, and wanted me to go with her and have a talk, before the wedding, where we could be completely honest with one another. That sounded a little weird to me. I thought we were already completely honest with one another. After all, we were getting married in 2 weeks, right? Also, she was super protective about her therapy sessions, didn't really talk about them. I have never met her therapist, so to be invited there all of a sudden seemed a little out of place to me. The day comes, and I go there, but out of self-preservation, I had my phone opened and recording any audio. My fiancée was already there. I had to wait 20 minutes before I was invited in. The therapist greets me and shakes my hand. We have small talk. She tells me I am not at all the way my fiancé described me. I think she is trying to compliment me. Then she looks at my fiancée and tells her this may be harder than we thought. That absolutely weirded me out. But I am a calm and collected individual, and I don't react, just kept that dumb smile on my face we all have in awkward situations. So the therapist starts talking, has a small speech I don't care to repeat. My fiancé takes my hand as the therapist starts telling me that we live in a modern world, and that my fiancé wants us to have a non-conventional marriage moving forward. I smile. I am not sure what the hell that means. Through my mind I am thinking she wants to talk how she will not be a slave to her husband, she will not sacrifice her work life, etc. modern woman and girl power and all that. Nope, she is actually talking about how once we get married, she wants to be free to sleep with other men, the other non-traditional type of marriage. I forgot it's 2018, but she loves me a lot, and would not be comfortable with me having the same benefits, because she would be too heartbroken knowing that I find other women attractive and that one of them could steal me from her. So I let them finish talking. They were very fluent, and they got more confident talking. Probably empowered by my lack of reaction, and because I wasn't saying anything. This was definitely something they have rehearsed. I then asked the therapist if she is licensed. This, by her reaction, was not what she expected to be the first thing coming out of my mouth. She said yes, so I told her to explain to my fiancé why we will not be getting married anymore, and why we will not continue being a couple starting immediately. I wished them good luck, and left the office. Now, I want to report the therapist. I am not sure if I have to report her to the clinic, or is there a board that supervises therapists? I don't think they're planning an attempt to corner me as professional conduct, and I want her to pay for the misconduct. That session did not sit well with me. To be clear, there would have been no positive outcome to this talk my fiancé and the therapist had with me. Even if she wanted a completely open marriage, where I could sleep with other women, the outcome from my part would have been the same. That is not a marriage, that is a sham. It also dawns on me, she might have cheated on me. Now that I have this clarity of mind, certain things don't match up, so I was a fool anyway. I listened to the recording, and I still can't believe what was said there. Anyway, I called off the wedding. I am a very easygoing guy. There are no fights with me because I am not seeking them. There are no conflicts, enemies, because my life is guided on principle and common sense. That might have given my ex the impression I will be easy to walk over, like a doormat, but she is an idiot for thinking that. Having listened to the recording a few times, I am confident the therapist recognized I am not how my fiancé must have described me in their sessions. Hence that this may be harder than we thought. Now that the wedding is no longer happening, people are starting to ask questions I am not comfortable answering. How do I navigate this? I am sure my ex is doing damage control, but I have the recording, and if she goes too far off the path, I will not shy letting people know what she wanted us to talk about. But my parents and family also want answers, and I am not sure what lies to tell them. I don't want them to think I am an idiot for allowing my ex to get to this point where she was so confident that she straight out told me she wants to F other dudes. She is also blowing my phone, my best friend's phone, my brother's phone. We can work on this. I didn't understand what they were telling me in the therapy session. She will do anything to fix this. It was the therapist's idea, she was against it, etc. Last cry of a dying siren. All her cries fall on deaf ears, and I am the owner of said ears. We were also working to get a loan to buy a house, but I cancelled everything. I basically erased any ties we had financially, or otherwise. Her current plea is that in therapy she exposed her insecurities about our intimate history. I had considerably more partners than her, and the therapist came up with the idea we should level the field. Regardless of the truth of this, that therapist gets reported once I figure out where to do it, and what to say. This post is mostly a rant, but I would also want to know how would you handle the questions of friends and family. My ex is certainly doing her own damage control, and I don't want to be a he said, she said. I do have the recording, and am wondering if I should send it to the interested parties. My ex doesn't know I have the recording. Monday last week I talked with a lawyer at work about the situation with the therapist. He looked at me like I was lying to him, and asked me if this was a prank. So I asked him if he wants to hear the recording. Damn right, was his answer. I talked again with him the next day. At the end of it, he noted a few things I didn't pay attention to. On the recording, the therapist was always saying we think, we want, we talked about, we decided. Not once did she say your ex here asked me to talk with you or your ex wants you to know, or anything like that. It was always we this, we that. He also asked me what my endgame is. Do I want to sue? He didn't think I personally have a case, to which I agreed. I never intended to sue anyway, but notify the appropriate institutions and let them deal with the therapist. A decision was made to write 2 letters, one addressed to the clinic the therapist works at, and one for APA. We checked, she was accredited. By Wednesday there were a few more people at work aware of the situation, including one of the 2 case researchers. She dug up information about the therapist, online reviews, as well as the contacts for 2 of her previous patients. The therapist didn't have the best reviews. There were people upset with her, and we managed to track the two we talked with through social media. They were more than happy to help once we explained the situation, and their stories were not any better than mine. The letters grew a consistent size, as we included the signed stories from the other two individuals, as well as my own description of how my ex changed once she started the therapy sessions, and a detailed description of how my meeting with the therapist went. Friday last week I met with the parents. Her parents came to my parents' house, and we had the talk. My ex was there too, and more info was disclosed. That made its way to the report on the therapist as well. This week, we sent the reports out. There was a reaction from the clinic. They called our office on Thursday morning, most probably to check if it is a prank or a real issue. We talked with their lawyer, or one of their lawyers, over the phone, and, when we confirmed it was legitimate, someone else was heard in the background, on their end, with a crap, they said they are taking this very seriously. A conclusion from one of the guys at work was that they probably received other complaints before, but this is the first time someone did it so well documented. Their letter also mentioned we are reporting this to APA, that might have turned the heat on as well, hence their quick reaction. I don't know what the result of this will be, and I consider my issue with it closed. However, having talked with the other two individuals that were treated by this therapist, I sincerely hope she is at least investigated, because she sounds insane and with an agenda. She ruined their relationships as well. One of the individuals was a woman, for the record. Then, my ex and her parents. Friday last week my parents called me and asked me to give them a visit after work. When I did, surprise, my ex and her parents were there too. My first reaction, seeing their cars in my parents' driveway, was to flee. This meeting was supposed to be on my terms, but she attempted to take the reins to it. That was not going to happen, let me tell you. My ex was waiting for me outside. She looked very good. If there was ever a girl you'd like your parents to meet, she was the image of it. She told me they are here to talk with me, and see if we can fix this. They as in her parents. She either never told them what happened, or she gave them a version of a story they were not buying. She had a journal with her. She told me she started writing in it before she began therapy, and continued writing in it until that Friday morning. That I should read it and it will clear out all this mess. I told her this is not a book club. I wanted to go inside and get the circus going, but she asked me if I can give her 10 minutes. She wants to talk with me for 10 minutes before I talk with her parents, and she kept handing me her journal, and started crying. And then my sister showed up, and then my ex's sister showed up. They were already there, and came out to check on us. So I took her journal, went inside, said hello, and leave my ex in the back of the garden, to an as isolated portion of my parents' garden as possible. They have a large garden with a lot of trees and benches. She quit her job. The stress was too much, and she had a breakdown. It escalated, never got better. She is no longer seeing the therapist. She started seeing the therapist for work-related matters, but somehow it turned into matters about our relationship, and it stayed focused on the relationship because it was the only thing the therapist seemed interested in. She never told her parents why she is my ex. She is seeing another therapist now. I just listened. She turned the discussion from her to us. Told me I would be in control. I will be managing the finances. I will receive access to all her devices. I will be able to track everywhere she goes. Any property we will own will be in my name. She will do anything I want to trust her again. Basically things she said in her messages over the last weeks. She enumerated more things than the ones I mention. I don't know how she thinks that would be a healthy life, for either of us. I asked her if she cheated. She told me she had the opportunity to cheat, but she had never. I believe her, but it also angered me. What does she mean she had the opportunity? If you are in a committed relationship, you don't put yourself in a position where you have this opportunity. You don't want this opportunity. It's like saying I had the opportunity to kill someone today. Why? What were you doing that there was such an opportunity? Why call it opportunity anyway? It makes it sound like something positive. That pretty much ended our 10 minutes, and told her we should go and talk with our parents. So we did. I asked our sisters to leave us alone, as it was not any of their concern what was to be discussed. My sister huffed and puffed, but a house made of stone survives hurricanes, and she was not one. Well, I talked, and explained what happened, how the therapy session went, and my resolve. I didn't mention I had a recording, because I never had to. My ex confirmed everything I said, which surprised me. Her father had teary eyes, and that broke my heart. Her mother asked her if this is how she thinks they raised her, and asked for an explanation. My ex basically told them the same story. Stress at work, depression, breaking down, therapy, therapist wanting to talk only about our relationship. That the therapist told her our relationship was the root of all her stress. That the therapist convinced her I want an open relationship. That she might lose me if she doesn't level her intimate experience with me. How my reaction woke her up from her slump. She quit her job, is looking for something less stressful. She will do anything I want to get me back. Started crying. My ex mentioned the journal again, and said if I read it, it will explain everything, and that she was not on board with the therapist's ideas, but she went along with them because the therapist was a person with authority and experience. Our parents looked at me and I told them someone's private journal is not the type of literature I read, unless they are a dead poet. Big mistake. My intention was to relate that someone's private journals usually becomes literature if they are a famous writer, or leader, and usually they are published post-mortem. Also, I was hoping they get the hint that I don't really want to read her journal, because it would be of no consequence. What was done was done. Everyone looked at me as if I wished death on my ex. You could smell the hostility in the air. So I said fine, and promised I will read her journal. You win some, you lose some, and then you use the wrong word. What is the craziest criminal case in history? At the 1994 annual awards dinner given by the American Association for Forensic Science, OFF's president Don Harper Mills astounded his audience in San Diego with the legal complications of a bizarre death. Here is the story. On March 23, 1994, the medical examiner viewed the body of Ronald Opus and concluded that he died from a shotgun wound off head. The decedent had jumped from the top of a 10-story building intending to commit suicide. He left a note indicating his despondency. As he fell past the 9th floor, his life was interrupted by a shotgun blast through a window, which killed him instantly. Neither the shooter nor the decedent was aware that a safety net had been erected at the 8th floor level to protect some window washers and that Opus would not have been able to complete his suicide anyway because of this. Ordinarily, Dr. Mills continued, a person who sets out to commit suicide ultimately succeeds, even though the mechanism might not be what he intended. That Opus was shot on the way to certain death 9 stories below probably would not have changed his mode of death from suicide to homicide. But the fact that his suicidal intent would not have been successful caused the medical examiner to feel that he had homicide on his hands. The room on the 9th floor whence the shotgun blast emanated was occupied by an elderly man and his wife. They were arguing and he was threatening her with a shotgun. He was so upset that, when he pulled the trigger, he completely missed the wife and the pellets went through the window striking Opus. When one intends to kill subject A but kills subject B in the attempt, one is guilty of the murder of subject B. When confronted with this charge, the old man and his wife were both adamant that neither knew that the shotgun was loaded. The old man said it was his long-standing habit to threaten his wife with the unloaded shotgun. He had no intention to murder her, therefore, the killing of Opus appeared to be an accident. That is, the gun had been accidentally loaded. The continuing investigation turned up a witness who saw the old couple's son loading the shotgun approximately 6 weeks prior to the fatal incident. It transpired that the old lady cut off her son's financial support and the son, knowing the propensity of his father to use the shotgun threateningly, loaded the gun with the expectation that his father would shoot his mother. The case now becomes one of murder on the part of the son for the death of Ronald Opus. There was an exquisite twist. Further investigation revealed that the son, Ronald Opus, had become increasingly despondent over the failure of his attempt to engineer his mother's murder. This led him to jump off the 10-story building on March 23, only to be killed by a shotgun blast through a 9th-story window. The medical examiner decided the death to be a suicide. What's the best question someone asked in SX Ed? The actual best question someone asked was, if you do come inside a girl, what's the probability that she actually gets pregnant and the baby comes to term? The instructor actually had no idea but just told everyone to not do it, and that he'd come back next class with some answers. He did, and he told us that the probability of SX at any random time leading to pregnancy is quite low, doing it at a time she is fertile, the stuff actually sticking, everything happening the way it does until the embryo implants itself in the uterine lining, all that, quite low. It's definitely not a guarantee after sticking your D inside a girl without a condom for 3 seconds. He also then told us that a lot could go wrong before the 9 months are actually up. Many pregnancies end in miscarriages. He said something like 30%. He said that while it might be unlikely for any given time you have SX to lead to an actual baby, we see it a lot because so many people are having SX. And obviously, you only hear about the times people do have babies without hearing about how many times they had SX, for how long, with how many people, and how many failures each person before that had. He said that despite this, you could easily become one of those people, so you should never chance it regardless. He explained that since the only guaranteed method of preventing pregnancy is abstinence, there is always some risk associated with SX, whether you use protection or not. So, the most intelligent thing to do is to minimize the risk as much as possible, even if it is not as likely as we originally thought to get someone pregnant. He was a very wise and honest man, my SX Ed instructor. Lawyers, what was your oh shit moment in court? Yesterday I concluded a particularly difficult murder trial, wherein I was tasked with representing the defendant. My main defense was to create suspicion amongst the jury that my client wasn't the one who did it. Things weren't going well as I didn't have much concrete evidence, so knowing that I was likely going to lose the case, for my closing argument I paused and looked at my watch before proclaiming that the victim would walk through the courtroom door within a minute. The full panel of jurors directed their attention to the door, waiting to see if someone was going to come in. Unfortunately, no one came through the doorway, as anticipated. I then addressed them and stated that they must have possessed a reasonable level of doubt about my client's guilt due to the fact that they were all waiting for the victim to make an appearance at the door. They seemed to receive my message reasonably well with a few nods here and there, so I thought I had got somewhere. That was it. That was my closing argument, and even with my lasting impression the jury came back with a guilty verdict. I asked the jury afterwards what had convinced them of the defendant's guilt. Granted, they all looked at the door. They all looked at each other. Then this one woman named Gruder chimed up and said while everyone else was looking at the door, I noticed that one person wasn't who I asked. Your client, she replied. Decided to surprise my husband. I'm not the best at keeping secrets, so it's killing me inside and I wanted to let it out somewhere, so here I am. Yesterday, I overheard my husband talking to his friend over the phone about how much he missed his mother's homemade meals. We're both Indian first-gen Americans. Since we got married a little over a year ago and moved in together, we've mainly been cooking easy to make meals. We split the cooking 50-50 and keep our meals as healthy as possible while trying out different stuff, but we barely dipped our toes in our own culture's cuisine. There aren't any Indian grocery stores near us, so it's hard to find certain key ingredients, but we figured it was no big deal and gave up on the idea. I had no problem with it, but I didn't know how much he was craving my mother-in-law's food until yesterday. Both of our families live in another state, so it's just us two, so I decided to call up my mother-in-law last night to ask her for the recipe of my husband's favorite dish. Once I wrote down everything I needed, I tried looking for the nearest Indian grocery store. 2 hours away, yikes. However, I was in too deep to go back at that point, so I woke up at 5 a.m. today, about 6 hours before we normally wake up on the weekends, and drove to the store to get everything I needed. I made sure to buy in bulk so we could continue to cook more of our favorite meals for a while. Once I got back at around 10:30, I made sure to check if he was still asleep before I brought the grocery bags in, and thankfully he was, so I hid the bags in an empty kitchen cabinet and acted as naturally as I could. Obviously I needed him out of the house, so I called up one of his close friends to ask if he could hang with him for a few hours, which he was glad to do, so now I'm home alone. I'm currently working on the recipe my mother-in-law gave me, and I have been struggling a bit, but I'm trying my best. I really hope he loves it, or at least appreciates my efforts in the event that it doesn't turn out that great. Kind of nervous though. If this gets any attention, I'll post an update. I went on my first date yesterday. Since you died, I wasn't even sure it was a date. I'd quietly made peace with retiring my heart for good long ago, so when she asked for my number, after an evening of what I later realized were attempts to engage me, I was so surprised. I concluded it wasn't a date, confirmed when she proposed a vague, quick lunch on a Monday, but I felt a surprisingly little spiritual lift. I spent all morning feeling anxious. I left my house 2 hours before lunch. I had walked around to burn off nervous energy, and then she texted to say she'd be late, and she was a little later than that, so I ended up sitting for 40 minutes at the restaurant, feeling silly that I had made such a big deal out of nothing. Maybe she wouldn't even show, but then she did, and it was immediately obvious that it was a date. I was indeed nervous. I confessed this earlier. I babbled a little about you, and she asked if it was okay to ask questions about you, and asked some questions about you. And the first thing she asked was how you and I had met, and I couldn't help it. I told her about how we had met on the eve of the 4th of July, which happened to be today as well, ironically. Cosmic sign? And we passed 2 hours very easily. I barely touched my food, I couldn't really get myself. Yet at the same time I somehow felt confident enough to grab the check and tell her that she's got the next one. She asked me to continue hanging out, but I felt a little overwhelmed and went home, but stopped at a bar to have a drink and cry about all the life that happened recently. Edit. I know that the beginning was very abrupt, so I do appreciate all of you for sticking with me and my personal story. I miss you so much, baby, and I hope you know how much I love you till this day. I know you're taking care of yourself wherever you are. Continue to watch over me the way I used to do for you.